Thank you for joining us on this Thursday edition of Ed Schultz News and Commentary. A lot has happened in the last few days. Let's see. Jim Webb realized that he was making a fool of himself. The vice president announcing yesterday that he is not going to run. And now we're really down to two. I mean, Martin O'Malley's in it and Chafee's in it, but they're not going to get anywhere. So the American people are now going to be focusing in on the Benghazi hearings, which we'll talk about in just a moment with a number of people. But first of all, I just want to point out that I think that this is a real opportunity for the Sanders camp to start to differentiate exactly what he would do if he were president versus if Hillary Clinton was president. And I'm talking about Wall Street. I'm talking about round two of health care. I'm talking about minimum wage and how he would go about doing it and all the things for workers' rights in this country. There's going to be a fight between Clinton and Sanders when it comes to union endorsements in this country. We'll talk more about that in later shows. But today, this is a moment for, I think, Bernie Sanders to pivot and turn up the heat. Number one, turn up the heat on the corporate media and start asking the questions. Why is it that all of the polling that is out there, Sanders is never included when it comes to head-to-head competition against any Republican? I mean, we all know that Wall Street doesn't want Bernie Sanders, but the fact of the matter is that he does have a movement, whether they want to call it that or not. He's getting the money, he's getting the supporters, he's getting the people, and if Bernie Sanders doesn't win Iowa or New Hampshire, it could be over fast, because right now the national polling shows that Hillary is going to be getting a bounce and is getting a bounce now that Joe Biden is out of it all. So this puts pressure on the Sanders camp. He needs to pivot to a more aggressive position. And last night, he kind of started to do that in a very friendly way when he was on Jimmy Kimmel.
And some of these people are your supporters. Some of your supporters say you're not electable. They say you're too old. They say you're too far left. They say you don't bother to brush your hair. How do you respond to something like that, where people say, why bother supporting this guy? He's not going to be president.
It's a fair question. Let me answer it in two respects. If you look at polls out there, it turns out that in many of the polls, I am doing better than Hillary is against Donald Trump. We're doing better. Number two, when Republicans win, God forbid.
Okay, hold it right there. Hold it right there. That's a story, isn't it? If there are some polls out there that shows that Bernie Sanders is beating Donald Trump more than Hillary Clinton, it would seem to me that that would be a hell of a story, something to follow up on. Now, I haven't seen that. I'm not sure what poll Bernie Sanders is referring to, but that's a hell of a story. I mean, Donald Trump is gaining in the polls. In fact, the Republicans right now are trying to figure out, okay, is it time to surrender? Do we have to realize that it is going to be Trump? But if that's the story, if that's the case, then it would seem to me that we'd start seeing some town hall meetings on some of the networks with Bernie Sanders. Finish up.
Number two, when Republicans win, God forbid. When they win, Jimmy, voter turnout is very low. People, and we got millions of people are really discouraged and have given up on the political process. We have brought out in this campaign over 250,000 people to meetings. We have 650,000 individuals have contributed to our campaign. We have a real grassroots campaign, and I believe that if I am the Democratic nominee, you're going to see voter turnout go way up. I think we're going to win the White House. I think we recapture the Senate. We do well in the House. We win governor's chairs. Our job is not just to defeat Republicans. Our job is to revitalize American democracy, bring people who have given up on the political system back into the system, and create a government which represents them rather than large campaign donors.
Well, I'll tell you what, if the Sanders camp was paying attention to Bernie's performance last night on Jimmy Kimmel, which I'm sure they were, you want to take that last soundbite and you want to make that your opening statement in every debate. Because no one can argue with what Bernie Sanders is saying at this point when he describes his campaign. It's enthusiastic. It's visionary. It's hopeful. You can't ever stop selling hope. And so I think that this is a real opportunity for Sanders to get a heck of a lot more aggressive and tell the American people what the heck he would do if he was president. and start selling this idea and believing in the fact that he can win the nomination and he can be the president. Just because Bill O'Reilly's out there on The View saying that he has no chance doesn't mean shit. I mean, who the hell's Bill O'Reilly? He's just a cable head, just like anybody else. The fact is that Bernie has the support, but he has to start gaining more support by making people believe. And the question that Jimmy Kimmel asked was very interesting. He said that people that support him say that he's not electable. I haven't seen that story. I don't know anybody out there who seriously thinks that they support Bernie Sanders. Well, I support Bernie, but he can't win. That's not out there. That's an unfair position to put the candidate in. Get aggressive, Bernie. Get after it. When we come back, Katrina vanden Heuvel of The Nation magazine on the Benghazi hearings, on Paul Ryan, and where Bernie Sanders goes from here. Stay with us. This is brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team. This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com. www.biogreenclean and order today.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Back with you on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Good to have you with us. Big day in the news, the Benghazi hearings. What is Paul Ryan going to do? I don't know about you, but the thought of Paul Ryan being Speaker of the House doesn't excite me a bit. And I don't hold out any hope, nor do I believe that there's going to be any sea change of attitude. And whereas yesterday Joe Biden said that he wasn't going to run for the presidency, there was an air of disappointment in my head about this sales pitch that it seems the vice president's making, that we all need to get along and the partisanship and the bickering that's taking place in Washington has to stop. Well, Mr. Vice President, I hope you're not talking to the Democrats, because the Democrats, the liberals, aren't the ones that have been doing all the blocking of any kind of legislation that would move this country forward, such as infrastructure and jobs. The Democrats have not voted to get rid of health care, to take it away from 10 million people. The Democrats haven't stopped everything in its track with a record number of filibusters. So, I don't know who the vice president was talking about yesterday. I think he was talking about the totality of Washington. Well, wait a minute. We got to get to the root of the problem more than that. It is the Republicans. And now there's this jargon about whether they're friends or not. Look, they are political adversaries, and at the top of the list, you're going to find, or at least close to the top of the list, you're going to find the guy that was on the vice presidential ticket last time, and that's Paul Ryan, who's the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. This guy wants to privatize everything he can get his hands on. So I don't share in this enthusiasm that, oh my goodness, we're going to have a Speaker of the House. Katrina vanden Heuvel, editor, part owner of The Nation, joins us. Katrina, good to have you on.
Hey, thank you, Ed.
Your thoughts on Paul Ryan?
Well, let me just, on Joe Biden, I mean, I think he ended the Hamlet on the Potomac drama with dignity, and I think he will still play an important role, but I do think that was the shot across the bow at Hillary Clinton, this idea that Republicans are not our enemies. They're not enemies, but they are adversaries, and they are ideologues, and they have different ideas, and there's nothing wrong with a partisanship of ideas to insist on, for example, government is there to improve the conditions of people's lives, which is something Joe Biden has said he believes in fervently and has acted on as best he can for these last decades. Paul Ryan, as you said, is someone who's wanted to privatize everything that moves. I was struck in 2000, and the last election, Ed, when he was lifted up. Paul Ryan was lifted up as this character of courage and audacity. For what? For trying to build a budget on the backs of working people, of poor people. I mean, 3/5 of the cuts in that budget, which was touted as the second coming, would inflict pain on those who are the most hurt by the recession, by financial pain. Wanted to privatize Medicare, one of the great programs of our country. So, I think the landscape has shifted. I think the speaker's race has, as our national affairs correspondent William Greider writes in the cover story this week in The Nation, it's about a GOP crack-up.
Yeah.
And it's about a crack-up between the country club Republicans, who have long had their way, with hardline social extremist conservatives who understand they've gotten shafted, right? This is the old game, but they're seeing it more clearly. So it's quite a historic moment, and I think to put it in that context gives it a little more oomph, so to speak, as we witness the Republican Party's travails.
Well, the Freedom Caucus last night did not give a formal endorsement, but they did give a supermajority, which by the math is going to give Paul Ryan enough votes to be the Speaker of the House if he wants to do it. So that
supermajority, though, is, as you said, it's weak coffee in some ways. I mean, it's going to put them back in that position where the Speaker is under constant assault by, those who are using the word freedom, and it drives me crazy the way the word freedom is deformed. But the so-called Freedom Caucus, wants its way. Now, it is the case, I think, both on the Democratic and Republican side, that members should have more input into leadership. But the Freedom Caucus has its own agenda, which isn't much of an agenda. It's basically repeal everything, hold 15 hearings on things that don't need to be held, and don't pass legislation that actually improves the conditions of people's lives. So I know that Ryan is also trying, this motion to vacate the chair, to eliminate that, because he saw what that did to Boehner. It was the tool used to push Boehner into retirement. And so I think the Freedom Caucus is having its way. We'll see what works out.
Okay. Katrina vanden Heuvel with us, part owner, editor of The Nation magazine. Let's talk Benghazi. The committee opens up another round of hearings today. With Biden out of the race, clearly in the polls, Hillary Clinton has gotten a bump. We have seen this unfold politically with the Majority Leader McCarthy and the comments that he's made. And now this is Trey Gowdy, who is the chair of the House Special Committee on Benghazi. Here he is on Face the Nation, I think politically trying to mop this up.
Colleagues and friends, shut up talking about things that you don't know anything about. And unless you're on the committee, you have no idea what we've done, why we've done it, and what new facts we have found. We have found new facts, John, that have absolutely nothing to do with her. I get that people don't want to talk about that, but the 7 members of my committee are much more focused on the 4 dead Americans than we are anyone's presidential aspiration.
Okay. Is this a big mountain for Hillary Clinton to climb, or is this going to be viewed by people? And the last polling out there is that people are sick and tired of her emails, and Bernie said that in the last debate. But is this a big mountain for her to climb right now, Katrina?
I think what we're witnessing today will be Hillary Clinton confronting, as millions of people have learned in these last weeks, this is a hyper-partisan committee with the intent to damage Clinton. It is a committee that has essentially functioned as an oppo research arm of the Republican National Committee, far more interested in digging up what it can against Hillary Clinton than any remaining mysteries. After 7 investigations, right, $4.5 million investigations into the 4 Americans killed in Benghazi, what happened that night. I have a somewhat different take, though, Ed. I mean, I think this committee is a travesty, and it is hyper-partisan. On the other hand, I do think what's a tragedy is also that we have a committee obsessed with Hillary Clinton's emails and probing the very narrow 2012 attack on the U.S. diplomatic compound in Benghazi. But we need a committee akin to what Senator William Fulbright held in 1966, looking into the Vietnam War, U.S. foreign policy. Why is it U.S. foreign policy has for years been based on the principle of regime change and endless war, which has gotten us no security, has isolated us in the world, fueled regional chaos, provoked more terrorism, and led to a catastrophic refugee crisis that if we don't deal with the roots of, trying to resolve politically the Syrian conflict, we're going to see millions and millions of more regime change refugees. Trey Gowdy going to look into that? I doubt it.
Katrina vanden Heuvel, always a pleasure. Great to have you with us.
Ed.
You bet. Owner and editor of The Nation magazine in their 150th year. They just had a birthday. They do fabulous work, no doubt. When we come back, Mark Dimondstein, who's the head of the Postal Workers Union, responding to what Bernie Sanders has put out as a proposal that the Postal Service in this country should do some basic banking services to help the working poor in this country, because banks reject a lot of people and make it hard for people of low income to facilitate themselves in this economy. Also with us, a critic of Hillary Clinton who says that she knew everything about the emails, and there is precedent that has not been really discussed in public. Stay with us. That's all coming up on Ed Schultz News and Commentary.
It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production, Ed Schultz News and Commentary. You can get it at WeGotEd.com, RawStory.com, and RingOfFire.com. And, of course, I always do a Give Me a Minute feature every day on my Facebook. Thanks for checking that out. Like us on Facebook as well. All right. Now, we've touched on the issue of privatization and how this is really going to be a big focal point if Paul Ryan ends up as Speaker of the House. He wants to privatize everything. And in recent years, I've done countless stories and given commentary and explained to the American people exactly what is happening to the American Postal Service, how they want to privatize that, how they have put a financial a burden on them that is just unbelievable. And now there are some proposals out there that are being pushed forward by Bernie Sanders that, this is another reason why I support Bernie and believe in Bernie, is that he wants to do something about the problems for working people. The Postal Service hires more veterans than any other employer in this country. They provide a vital service, guaranteed delivery. And the Republicans, of course, see a real market here, so they want to get rid of the unions, and, of course, they want to privatize everything they possibly can. This is what Bernie Sanders had to say about the Postal Service on Jimmy Kimmel last night.
We have millions and millions of low-income people who have to go to these payday lenders and pay outrageous interest rates. They're getting ripped off right and left. We can have our Postal Service provide modest banking to low-income people where they can cash their checks and they can do banking. I think it will help the post office and it will help millions of low-income people.
Bernie Sanders with another good idea. Let's go to Mark Dimondstein. He is the president of the American Postal Workers Union. Mr. Dimondstein, good to have you with us.
Good morning, Ed.
What do you make of that proposal? This is the first I've heard of the post office possibly being used or in conversation about doing some banking services for folks that do not access commercial banks. What do you make of it?
Well, Ed, we think it's a great idea. And Senator Sanders is getting it out there to the public in a way that some of us can't. So we are very pleased with that. We have been supporting this idea for the last few years. So have some of the other postal unions. And what a lot of people don't know is for 60 years in this country, the United States Postal Service did provide some level of a postal savings bank and a postal bank. And countries all over the world do it. We think it's a wonderful idea. One, you have a great social need, 6 to 8 million people that don't have access to banking. Many of them are vets, many of them are single women, many of them live in rural areas, many live in urban areas. So it's another way that the Postal Service can fulfill its wonderful mission of weaving the people of the country as one, so to speak. And so it meets a great social need. The post office is in every community where banks aren't. There's over 30% of the zip codes have no bank, but guess what? They all have a post office, well-trained people, accountable people, trusted people, great idea. It's a win-win-win.
Okay. Do you have the manpower to do this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We have, as all the customers know, there are postal clerks, retail clerks in every town, in every neighborhood. They're trained. They are there. They already provide. We already provide some basic financial services. Most people have bought money orders. And so this is just an expansion of things that we already do. And why should somebody have to pay 5 or 10% of their hard-earned paycheck just to get a cash somewhere when they could come to a post office for a small fee, get it done in a trusting environment, and let's do away with these legal loan shark predatory lenders out there.
Well, you're restricted. The Postal Service is restricted, or should we say confined into certain areas of operation. There are areas where you could compete with the private sector that you're not allowed to, correct?
Right. But on postal financial services, there are a number of things that the post office can already do and expand without getting any kind of legislative change. And Ed, I want to raise one other thing about the postal banking story. Sure. The Office of Inspector General in January 2014 put out a report examining the social problem and advocating that the post office take this on big time. So it's not just what Mark Dimondstein's saying. It's not just what Senator Sanders saying. The Office of Inspector General of the United States Postal Service said this is a great way for the Postal Service to go. Provides the service, brings in revenue, protects jobs. Beautiful.
Mark Dimondstein, great to have you with us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Great story. We'll follow it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ed.
You bet. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. When we come back, the Benghazi hearings. What is the course that Hillary Clinton is going to take to completely exonerate herself in this process? Stay with us.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
The Ed Schultz Internet broadcast is brought to you by the Ring of Fire radio show. Listen to the Ring of Fire weekends on radio stations across the country. Get more information and the news of the day at ringofireradio.com.
Good to have you with us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. The Benghazi hearings at the time of this recording on this Thursday, the hearings have not started, and we will update as the day goes on at WeGotEd.com. I want to visit now with Diane Roark. She has got a lot of experience. She retired after 17 years of professional staff for the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. She also served on the National Security Council staff for the Office of the Secretary of Defense and in the intelligence section of the Internal Division of the Department of Energy. So she's been around classified information. She understands exactly what the handling of classified information means, and she has written a piece on the Institute for Public Accuracy's website entitled Classified Politics, a System and a Clinton in Disrepute. She writes, Mrs. Clinton clearly and knowingly mishandled classified information. Security clearances were required for her membership on the Senate Armed Services Committee from 2003 to 2009. Therefore, she knew the rules for handling classified information before she decided at the outset when she became Secretary of State in early 2009 to use personal rather than secure email. She also goes on to write, it simply could never be argued plausibly that for 4 years a person in the highest U.S. foreign policy slot had no classified or sensitive information in any business emails that she wrote or received over 30,000 of them. This defies the definition of the job. Ms. Roark, good to have you with us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary.
Good morning.
What's going to happen today? How big a hurdle is this based on what you wrote and your perspective on this? I would come to the conclusion that Hillary Clinton's got a lot of problems.
Yes, I think she does. Now, whether they will, whether the FBI will prosecute her, the U.S. Justice Department will prosecute her is another big issue, of course. But yes, I believe that she has a lot of problems. I think from what I have read, the hearing will be conducted in a business-like manner. And certainly if the chairman has his way, there won't be as many politics as has been in the past. But I believe she has some very serious questions to answer. And not just her, but really the administration as well. Okay. Now, you take the position that since she was on the Senate Armed Services Committee, she absolutely knew what the difference between a personal email server and also a government server and the use of information. This is what Hillary said in a press conference back in March when this first came up.
When I got to work as Secretary of State, I opted for convenience to use my personal email account, which was allowed by the State Department, because I thought it would be easier to carry just one device for my work and for my personal emails instead of two. Looking back, it would have been better if I'd simply used a second email account and carried a second phone, but at the time, this didn't seem like an issue.
Okay, she says it, excuse me, she says it was allowed. Your thoughts on that? Well, what she has said since then, and others have said, is that the State Department discouraged it, but did not really outlaw it. Of course, she was the top person at the State Department. Some people have complained that she never got permission to do that from any legal counsel or anything. But I guess she figured she'd give herself permission because she was the top person. It just because of her position, though, as I said, it's almost impossible for her to keep classified information out of the content of her emails. And the other issue that has not been raised with her, which has been surprising to me, is the issue of sensitive but unclassified information. Mm-hmm. In other words, almost everything that before every decision, there is a lot of sensitive but unclassified information as well. There is a lot of diplomatic reporting that is not clearly classified, but, for instance, gives assessments of individual people or leaders that you don't want to have public because it would be very embarrassing diplomatically. And so nobody has raised that, but the agencies are often sticklers on this, and the State Department uses a lot of sensitive but unclassified information. Okay, so what would be, if you're on that committee today, what's your question to Hillary Clinton based on everything that has unfolded in the recent months? I would ask her what exactly her role was in forming the policy on this and what Mr. Obama's role was. The intriguing thing to me is that the apparent disengagement, even though her own people were under attack, and it appeared that the main concern in the emails released so far was to to handle the publicity about it. Mm-hmm. This was 2 months before the election. And their main goal, it appeared, was to show that it wasn't a policy failure, and this apparently is one of the reasons for the focus on the Internet video. Okay. I want to go back to she should have known, because that's pretty much what you write, because of her clearance that was on the Senate Armed Services Committee. In an interview with MSNBC in September, she said this about going to the State Department and what was surrounding that position.
I was not thinking a lot when I got in. There was so much work to be done. We had so many problems around the world. I didn't really stop and think, what kind of email system will there be? I just
do you buy that? Diane, what's your response to that?
No, I don't find that credible. She went to some extent to set up her own email system, and it was also untrue that she wanted only one email and one device. She had two of each.
You also write. So you don't think it's credible?
No, I don't think it's credible.
Okay. You also write about what happens to people who misuse information. There are people in jail because they've done that. Donald Trump has said that he thinks that this could be big trouble for Hillary. You say that's not going to happen, correct?
I think it's unlikely. I believe that the administration will cover for her.
You think President Obama will cover for her?
I think he will cover for her because she has covered for him.
Okay. Diane Roark, I appreciate your time on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. We'll check back with you again as this all unfolds, whether it's a political witch hunt or if there really is something there. And, of course, there's going to be a complete review on how these sensitive matters are handled and information passed along because of national security. Thanks so much. You bet. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. Ed Schultz News and Commentary. We'll update later in the day as the Benghazi hearings take place. If anything earth-shaking takes place, stay with us, and we're back tomorrow.